You spent some time with Caitlin Clark.
Best coaching job ever.
Best coaching job
Best
ever.
coaching job ever.
Being around Caitlin Clark, how was the experience for her? She's such a big star. I mean, the sky's the limit for her. To be around her, just talk about the type of person she is and how much she loves the game.
I'm going to be honest because it needs to be said. I can relate to that young lady, and I felt for her.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be a black woman and hated. That being said,
The conversation took a powerful turn. The legendary coach got real, honest in a way that caught everyone off guard. She said she could relate to Clark. She understands what it feels like to be criticized, to be doubted, to be targeted for reasons that go beyond performance. She spoke from experience, from a place of having faced hate herself, especially as a black woman in the spotlight. And then came the line that changed everything. Come on, you big dummies. You're getting paid now, right? That moment exploded online. Because it wasn't just a defense, it was a direct message to critics who've been constantly questioning Clark's rise. And when that message came from someone like Cheryl Miller, it carried serious weight. This wasn't random commentary.
But they won't recognize her impact.
Right.
How can you separate the two? It's kind of
you
hard,
know,
right?
and I used and you know, Jax, you're absolutely right. And I was like, come on, you big dumb.
It often felt personal. It started during Clark's college career at Iowa, where claims began circulating that didn't quite add up. One of the most repeated accusations was that Clark was a 25-year-old playing against much younger athletes. That claim? Completely false. Clark was 22 years old, exactly in line with what you'd expect from a senior college player. But the damage was already done. Once a narrative like that spreads, it plants doubt. It makes people question whether her dominance is truly earned or somehow inflated.
How much more experience that gives you over other players coming in, right? So people say, dang, like he or she's killing them. But you have a 25-year-old playing against a 20-year-old.
But again, reality told a different story. Clark averaged around 22. 7 shots per game. Yes, that's a high number, but it's completely normal for a player who is a focal point of the offense. More importantly, she wasn't just scoring. She was facilitating, creating plays, and carrying her team in multiple ways. Yet these exaggerated claims stuck. And that's what made Cheryl Miller's defense so important. Because this wasn't just about correcting stats, it was about correcting perception. Clark's impact goes far beyond the box score. She's not just putting up numbers. She's bringing attention, viewership, and energy to the league at a level rarely seen before. Games featuring her draw massive audiences. Conversations around the WNBA have grown louder, more intense, and more widespread.
Carry on.
I know you like that.
Hell yeah.
I said that because when she comes to the league, regardless of what team she goes to,
it ignores what's happening to the league as a whole. That's why Miller stepped in. Not just to defend a player, but to defend the truth. And when a legend speaks with that kind of clarity, people listen. Because sometimes it takes someone who's been through it all to call it exactly how it is. The criticism didn't stop, it evolved. At one point, the argument shifted toward records. The claim was simple. If Kelsey Plum set her scoring record in 4 years, then Caitlin Clark should only be judged the same way. Anything beyond that, some argued, would make the record questionable. The logic sounded convincing until you actually looked at the facts. Clark didn't take an extra year. She didn't rely on a 5th season. She broke the record in the standard 4-year window under the exact same rules as everyone else. No shortcuts. No advantages.
break a record. To me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that that player set it.
Okay.
Right? So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break.
Then the legitimacy of her records. When one argument fell apart, another one replaced it. To many fans, it no longer looked like criticism. It looked like a pattern. And the irony didn't go unnoticed. Critics pointed out that Cheryl Swoops herself averaged a high number of shots during her own college career, which made the selfish player narrative aimed at Clark feel inconsistent, if not outright hypocritical. That contradiction only added fuel to the conversation. Then came the debate about dominance. The claim was that Clark, and even players like Angel Reese, weren't truly dominating the league. But that raised a bigger question. What does dominance actually mean? Because when a rookie is averaging nearly 20 points per game, leading the entire league in assists, breaking records, and transforming viewership numbers,
Caitlin or Angel would come into the league and dominate immediately, which I don't think either of them did.
Respectfully, there is absolutely no way, even when we're trying to sit here and play semantics about dominating, there's no way that anyone could ever leave this season in saying that both Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese didn't dominate. You would have to further explain what dominance means for you to not sit here and say that a player who is leading the league in assists while averaging 19 to 20 points.
I helped do her shoe deal with Nike in 1993, took her to her first SBs. I've known Cheryl, I've coached her, have a lot of respect for her. I called her when Caitlin was still playing at Iowa and she had just broken Maravich's record. And it was all over the place, as you and I have discussed, that,
That constant doubt started to frustrate fans because greatness was happening in real time, and instead of being recognized, it was being dissected to the point of distortion, which leads to the big question, why? Why would a legend like Cheryl Swoops, someone who helped build the foundation of the WNBA, seemingly push back so hard against one of its most impactful new stars? On the surface, it could be framed as tough love, honest criticism, the kind that veterans give to the next generation. But to many watching, it felt deeper than that. Some saw it as a generational clash, an older era built on struggle, sacrifice, and limited recognition, colliding with a new era of viral fame, massive media attention, and instant stardom. Others pointed to a more complex issue, one involving race, visibility, and market dynamics. A league historically powered by black women now seeing unprecedented attention centered heavily around one white superstar. It's not a simple conversation, and it's definitely not a comfortable one, but it's part of the reality surrounding Clark's rise. Then there's another perspective, one that suggests a protective instinct, a feeling that the pioneers of the game, who fought for respect and survival during the league's toughest years, are now watching a new wave receive opportunities and recognition they never had. That tension, whether spoken or unspoken, adds another layer to everything. Regardless of the motive, the effect was undeniable. A cloud of skepticism followed Clark into the WNBA before she even played her first game. But once she stepped on the court, the narrative started to crack. Because performance doesn't lie. Clark didn't just adjust, she excelled. She began breaking rookie assist records, leading offenses, and proving that her game translates to the highest level. And suddenly, the criticism started to look out of place. The gap between what was being said and what was actually happening became impossible to ignore. And then came the turning point. In a move that shocked many, Cheryl Swoops was reportedly removed from broadcasting an Indiana Fever game. That wasn't just a small decision. It was a signal that the narrative had crossed a line. She was replaced by another respected voice, Nancy Lieberman, who took a very different approach. Instead of fueling the controversy, Lieberman calmly addressed the inaccuracies. She corrected the record. She brought the focus back to facts. Behind the scenes, she even reached out privately, encouraging Swoops to do the same, to clear things up, to protect credibility. But that advice reportedly wasn't taken well. And just like that, a long-standing relationship between two legends came to an end. At that point, this was no longer just a bait. It had real consequences, professional consequences, reputational consequences. Because in today's game, narratives matter. But facts matter more, and when those two collide, eventually something has to give. In this case, it was a narrative. Because no matter how much doubt surrounded her, Caitlin Clark kept doing the one thing that silences everything else, producing on the court, and changing the game while doing it. At a certain point, the situation reached a breaking line. The league itself had to step in. Because when criticism stops being grounded in reality and starts clashing with clear facts, performance, and even the business growth of the sport, it becomes a liability, not just to a player, but to the integrity of the game. And that's exactly what happened. The narrative had gone too far. The constant stream of doubt, the repeated inaccuracies, it forced a response. The message was clear. Opinions are welcome, but they cannot ignore reality. That moment changed everything. Because right when the noise reached its peak, the story flipped. And the person who stepped in next wasn't just credible, she was undeniable. Enter Cheryl Miller. Not just a legend, but one of the greatest to ever play the game. A multi-time national champion, Olympic gold medalist, and a Hall of Famer whose voice carries weight across every level of basketball. More importantly, she had something no one else had at that moment. Direct, first-hand experience with Caitlin Clark. She had just coached her at the WNBA All-Star Game. She saw her in practice, in film sessions, in the locker room, in moments the public never sees. So when she spoke, people listened. And what she said didn't just offend Clark, it dismantled the entire narrative. Come on, you big dummies. You're getting paid. That line hit like a shockwave, because it wasn't just emotional, it was factual. Miller pointed out something many were ignoring. The same people criticizing Clark were benefiting from her impact. Increased attention, higher ratings, more revenue, a growing salary cap. In simple terms, the game was growing, and Clark was a major reason why. But Miller didn't stop there. She went deeper, breaking down Clark's actual game from a technical perspective. She admitted something surprising. She didn't fully understand just how talented Clark was until she saw her up close. Not just as a scorer, but as a complete player. Her court vision? Elite. Her passing? On another level, hitting teammates in stride, sometimes without even looking. Her decision-making? Fast, instinctive, almost surgical. And perhaps most overlooked, her defense. Better, stronger, and more committed than critics gave her credit for. What Miller saw wasn't hype. She saw a generational playmaker, a player who doesn't just perform, but elevates everyone around her. Then came one of the most powerful parts of her message, empathy. Miller didn't just analyze Clark. She understood her. She spoke about what it feels like to be targeted, to be criticized beyond the game, to carry expectations and scrutiny that go far deeper than performance. She defended Clark's confidence, her edge, her swagger, not as arrogance, but as necessity, because at the highest level, confidence isn't optional. It's survival. And then, the story revealed its most human moment. Not on a podcast, not in front of cameras, but in a locker room. After the Indiana Fever secured a hard-fought win, Cheryl Miller found Caitlin Clark. And what happened next said more than any interview ever could. Miller embraced her, tight, genuine, protective. And in that moment, Clark, exhausted, under pressure, carrying the weight of everything around her, let her guard down. Finally, someone on my side. That wasn't about basketball. That was about everything else. The scrutiny, the noise, the expectations, the isolation that comes with being the face of something bigger than yourself. Miller understood that weight because she had carried it too. And in that embrace, she didn't just offer support. She gave guidance. I'm proud of you. Use this. Grow from it. But no matter what, keep being you. That moment changed the entire story, because this was no longer just about defending a player. This was about protecting one. So what does all of this really tell us? It tells us the game is changing. The numbers don't lie. Record-breaking viewership, sold-out arenas, rising salaries, global attention. The WNBA is growing, and at the center of that growth is Caitlin Clark. Not alone, but undeniably as a driving force. That's the reality, and that's what Cheryl Miller made clear. You don't have to like it. You can debate it. You can analyze it, but you can't ignore it. Because when performance, impact, and results all align, eventually, the truth becomes impossible to argue against. This feud ultimately became something much bigger than two opinions clashing. It turned into a symbolic battle about legacy, change, and who gets the credit when a sport finally breaks into a new era. Because what we're really watching isn't just a disagreement. It's a case study. A case study in how an established system reacts when a meteoric force arrives, one that doesn't follow the old rules, one that operates in a completely different media landscape, and one that instantly raises both the commercial and cultural ceiling of the game. And in the middle of that storm stood Cheryl Miller, a legend from an era that didn't have the spotlight, the money, or the recognition. An era built on sacrifice. Yet instead of resisting the future, she chose to become a bridge. She used her credibility not to block the next generation, but to protect it. Because when she looked at Caitlin Clark, she didn't see a threat. She saw something undeniable. Talent so rare, so impactful, that it needed to be defended, even from voices within its own legacy. And that's the part that stands out the most. Because sometimes the strongest support doesn't come from peers. It comes from those who've already carried the crown. Those who understand the pressure, the criticism, the isolation, and choose to offer guidance instead of resistance. Clark isn't just scoring points. She's exposing something deeper. The fault lines of a sport transitioning from niche to mainstream. And in doing so, she's revealing who is ready to embrace that future and who is still wrestling with it. Because at its core, this conflict highlights a universal tension in sports, the balance between collective struggle and individual stardom. For decades, the WNBA was built on unity, on sacrifice, on players fighting together for visibility, respect, and fair compensation. The we always mattered more than the me. Then came a moment like this, a player whose arrival didn't just bring talent, but an entire ecosystem with it. National spotlight, prime-time coverage, major endorsements, mainstream attention at a scale the league had never seen before. That kind of sudden, concentrated spotlight can feel unsettling, especially to those who spent years building the foundation without it. It can feel like history is being rewritten, like the struggle is being overlooked. And that's where the real question emerges. Can a league celebrate its breakthrough moment without alienating the pioneers who made that moment possible? Because the tension we're seeing was never just about stats or shots or records. It was about change. Fast, overwhelming change. And how people respond to it. At the same time, this entire saga reveals something else, the reality of modern sports media. In today's digital world, every opinion is amplified. Every critique becomes content. Every disagreement turns into a headline. Figures like Cheryl Swoops weren't just offering analysis. Their word became fuel for an algorithm-driven machine that thrives on conflict. And in that environment, nuance disappears. Debate turns into division. Fans stop discussing basketball and start taking sides. What should be analysis becomes something closer to a cultural battleground. That's why Cheryl Miller's voice mattered so much. Because she cut through all of that noise. She brought it back to something simple. Reality. What's happening on the court? What's happening to the league? And what's actually true? But more importantly, she brought something else that's often missing. Humanity. She reminded everyone that behind the headlines, behind the debate, behind the viral clips, there's a young player navigating pressure most people can't even imagine. And that perspective changed everything because it shifted the conversation from hype to respect, from narrative to facts, from division to understanding. In the end, what Cheryl Miller offered wasn't just a defense. It was a blueprint for how sports evolve the right way, where legends don't gatekeep, they guide, where history isn't used as a weapon, but as a foundation, where new stars aren't questioned into silence, but challenged, tested, and then embraced when they prove themselves. That's how traditions grow, not by resisting change, but by shaping it. For the WNBA, the message is clear. Growth will bring tension. New stars will bring debate. And moments like this will happen again. But the future of the league depends on how those moments are handled. With honesty, with respect, and with a willingness to pass the torch, not reluctantly, but proudly. Because this story, between Caitlin Clark, Cheryl Swoops, and Cheryl Miller, is more than drama. It's a turning point, a growing pain, and possibly a defining moment in the evolution of the league itself.